The privileged halls of Jefferson Academy hold two dangerous assumptions: that a black child must be lying about his Pentagon father, and that elite schools are beyond the reach of national threats. Both illusions shatter on Parents' Day. As Ms. Anderson's condescending smile freezes on her face, Jonathan Carter enters the classroom, not as the janitor or clerk they imagined, but as the strategic mind that safeguards a nation. His son Malik watches silently, vindication eclipsed by dawning fear, because his father isn't just there to prove a point. He's there to neutralize the breach that followed him into a school where no one believed the truth until it walked through the door wearing a security clearance higher than their imagination could reach. At Jefferson Academy, an illustrious bastion of academic distinction and refined privilege, the corridors gleamed with polished marble and golden sunlight, and every classroom seemed to exude an air of quiet superiority. In these hallowed halls, tradition and ambition intermingled, forging a relentless culture where intellect was celebrated and appearance was, by many, a silent prerequisite for acceptance. Yet even amidst these symbols of elite heritage, not every student were afforded equal respect. Malik Carter, a 15-year-old with deep brown skin that shone richly under the Academy's brilliant lights, walked these corridors with a mixture of quiet pride and subdued resolve. Though his impeccably pressed uniform and neatly combed hair attested to the high standards imposed at Jefferson, Malik's gentle eyes betrayed the weight of an inner burden, a constant reminder that not everyone appreciated his true worth. He was among those rare students who carried stories of excellence from neighborhoods far removed from the epicenter of privilege. And yet, for all his determination and innate intelligence, Malik often found himself the target of whispered sneers and subtle condescension. It was during one unassuming history class, a period filled with animated discussions of great leaders and pivotal military maneuvers, that Malik's world was, yet again, challenged by the harsh realities of bias. The classroom buzzed with earnest chatter as students recounted their family accomplishments, each sharing snippets that served as both boasts and silent tests of superiority. When it came time for Malik to speak, he rose slowly and, with a quiet humility that defined his character, offered a modest revelation. "My dad works in the Pentagon." A hushed murmur swept through the room. Instead of expressions of awe or respectful curiosity, Malik was met with biting sarcasm. Mrs. Anderson, the teacher known for her polished manners yet patronizing undertones, smiled thinly. Her eyes narrowed just enough to reveal her contempt. "Oh, Malik," she drawled in a tone that bordered on derision. "Perhaps your father is not the high-ranking strategist you imagine him to be. Maybe he's just a custodian, a janitor, to be more precise." The comment, made with a feigned air of humor, ignited a ripple of laughter among a group of students who exchanged glances and snatches of mocking remarks. The room, once filled with lively academic debate, now simmered with a different energy, a cocktail of ridicule and disbelief. For many of Malik's peers, his mention of the Pentagon was nothing more than a fantastical boast, an outlandish claim that didn't fit their preconceptions of big family achievements. The very idea that someone from his background could have a father holding one of the nation's highest security clearances was inconceivable to them. Malik's face remained composed as he listened. He did not flinch, nor did he raise his voice in protest at Mrs. Anderson's remark. Instead, the soft light in his eyes deepened with quiet determination. Beneath his calm exterior, a storm of emotions churned. A sense of disbelief, not at his own revelation, but at the blind prejudice on display. His words had been true. His father was indeed a strategist working in the Pentagon, entrusted with some of the nation's most sensitive secrets. Yet to those around him it sounded too audacious, too far removed from the reality they were comfortable with. Malik's silence in that moment was not a concession. It was a moment of inner reflection, a prelude to a choice he was yet to make. His gaze, steady and thoughtful, held the weight of unspoken promises. He hoped one day they would understand that nobility is not measured by the size of one's bank account or the preconceived stereotypes of their lineage, but by the quiet strength of one's character and the sacrifices made in the name of honor. In the weeks that followed that day, Malik's modest remark about his father became a quiet refrain among the corridors of Jefferson Academy. While some students continued to toss jests at his expense, and Mrs. Anderson's snide smile never quite left her lips when his name was mentioned, Malik found solace in the support of a few kind souls who recognized the truth behind his words. His best friend, Aisha, would often remind him, "Your father is your shield, Malik. One day, they'll see what you mean." Even as he navigated a daily gauntlet of microaggressions and snickers, Malik clung to a fervent hope. A hope that one day the real meaning behind his father's work would be celebrated rather than ridiculed. At home, the atmosphere was strikingly different. Malik's mother, a woman of quiet resilience with an unwavering belief in justice, often comforted him after difficult days. Over cups of lukewarm tea in their modest apartment, she would sit with him and remind him that every great idea or accomplishment was often met with resistance by those too steeped in tradition to imagine change. "They may mock you now, my dear," she would say gently, "but the future does not belong to those who cling to outdated notions. It belongs to those who dare to dream and defy expectations." And so, beneath the veneer of daily humiliation at his prestigious school, Malik harbored a secret certainty. The real test was not the ability to fit into a predetermined mold, but the courage to redefine what that mold should be in the first place. In every whispered insult, every sarcastic remark, he found a spark that fueled his inner resolve. His quiet dignity was a silent promise that the truth of his identity, of his father's secret and honorable service, would one day eclipse the ridicule of the present. Little did Malik suspect that the seeds of change had already been planted, seeds that would soon grow into something monumental. For on the horizon, the approaching celebration of Father's Day carried with it the promise of not only vindication, but also of a revelation that would silence mockery forever. A revelation that would come in the form of a man whose presence would challenge every preconceived notion at Jefferson Academy. His own father, Jonathan Carter, a high-ranking strategist from the Pentagon whose arrival would shake the very foundations of the academy. In the days following that fateful class, the echoes of laughter and sneering comments continued to reverberate in the hallways of Jefferson Academy. Malik Carter found himself increasingly isolated by the mockery, as classmates whispered behind closed doors and exchanged sideways glances that stung like little daggers. Every time he passed by a group, he would catch fragments of sarcastic remarks, snatches of words like Pentagon dreams and fantasy careers, that reinforced the notion that his claim was nothing more than an outrageous tale. To most of his peers, it was unthinkable that someone like him could hold a connection to a high-security institution. Yet, Malik knew in his heart that his father's service was real and honorable, even as the world around him continued to diminish its worth with every condescending chuckle. Inside his mind, Malik wrestled with a tumult of emotions. The public humiliation, delivered so casually by Mrs. Anderson in front of his entire class, had wounded him more deeply than he had ever expected. But despite the palpable sting, Malik's inner voice remained calm and resolute. He recalled each syllable of ridicule as if it were etched in stone, each dismissive phrase only serving to ignite a silent promise within him. One day, he would reveal the truth behind those words. Although his youthful face remained stoic during class discussions, his thoughts swirled like a storm. He wondered why some people were so quick to sanitize achievements that did not fit the narrow confines of their preconceived ideas. At night, as he lay on his modest bed in a small room that smelled faintly of hard-earned dreams and persistent effort, Malik replayed the event over and over in his head. He questioned if anyone truly saw him for who he was, an aspiring scholar with steadfast principles and a father who had given everything to serve his country. And even if many preferred to laugh rather than listen, he clung to the certainty of his own truth. At home, things were noticeably warmer. Malik's mother, a strong yet compassionate woman well acquainted with the obstacles imposed by society's deeply ingrained stereotypes, helped to soothe the raw edges of his wounded spirit. Over quiet dinners and whispered conversations in the dim light of their warm kitchen, she would gently remind him that real strength often lies quietly beneath the surface. "My dear Malik," she would say, her voice soft but firm, "you are more than any silly remark or shallow joke. Your father works in the Pentagon not because of some fairy tale, but because he commits himself to protecting our country every day. That is something to be proud of, no matter what others might say. Her words, imbued with both pride and a hint of sorrow at the injustice they witnessed, served as a salve over his bruised ego. She urged him to focus on his studies and to nurture the inner voice that believed in the possibility of change. Yet, despite the comfort of his mother's support, a deep-seated anxiety began to grow within Malik. Each day at school, when he walked into a classroom decorated with achievements and lofty expectations, he felt a persistent pressure to prove himself. The relentless pressure was not just to excel academically but to also embody a standard of brilliance that defied the prejudices of those around him. He often wondered if his quiet dignity and genuine intelligence were enough for a system that seemed to celebrate only those who fit a narrow stereotype. Every tormenting laugh from a classmate, every sarcastic comment from a teacher, lingered like a shadow over his potential, casting doubt on whether his unique perspective would ever be respected. In the midst of this inner conflict, Malik tried to immerse himself in his passions. He spent long hours in the library poring over books on political strategy, technology, and defense, subjects that he secretly admired because they were woven into the fabric of his father's mysterious life at the Pentagon. These texts offered him more than knowledge. They served as bridges connecting his own aspirations to the world his father inhabited. Malik scribbled notes in the margins and often spent late nights under the dim glow of his desk lamp, determined to carve out a future where his own voice would be heard despite the ridicule. It was in these moments of solitary study that he reminded himself that every great person had faced adversity. History was replete with voices that had been mocked only to later change the very society that had scorned them. Meanwhile, at Jefferson Academy, the culture of polished excellence and privileged backgrounds appeared unyielding. The institution prided itself on lineage and legacy, and Malik's revelation, simply stating that his father worked at the Pentagon, set him apart as if he belonged to a different reality altogether. Still, beneath the superficial veneer of the Academy's culture, Malik sensed an undercurrent of resentment and insecurity among some of his peers. For those who had never faced the harshness of disrespect based on who they were, his claim was as alien as it was audacious. Their laughter was not merely a reaction to a seemingly outlandish statement, but a defense mechanism, a shield to protect their own identities in a world that was slowly changing. Malik, with his quiet fortitude, internalized these lessons. He understood that the path to respect was often paved with struggle, and that the mockery he endured was not a measure of his worth, but a reflection of their limited capacity to imagine noble truths. By the end of those early uncertain days, even as the laughter and disdain persisted, a quiet transformation began in Malik's heart. He realized that while his peers might never truly understand the significance of his father's work, he was determined to let his own character speak louder than any scoff or sarcastic remark. He vowed silently that one day, he would have the opportunity to let the truth resound, a truth that was not defined by appearances, but by valor, integrity, and commitment to a higher cause. In the corridors of Jefferson Academy, where every day was an unspoken battle against entrenched prejudices, Malik's spirit began to harden with resolve. The humiliation he suffered became the crucible in which his determination was forged, and while his external calm belied the tempest within, every nerve in his body pulsed with the promise of redemption. Little did he know that fate had already set in motion events that would soon bring his father, the enigmatic strategist from the Pentagon, directly into his world, an event that would not only vindicate Malik's quiet declaration but also thrust him into the center of a crisis that could redefine the boundaries between respect and ridicule. Father's Day at Jefferson Academy usually carried a carefully orchestrated display of pride and presentation. A day when the hallways burst with fresh flowers, crisp cards, and the cheerful banter of students excitedly recounting tales of their father's mailroom miracles or high-powered boardroom victories. But on this particular morning, the celebratory air was tinged with an anxious undercurrent for Malik Carter. As the early sun spilled golden light across the polished marble floors, Malik's classroom buzzed with the anticipation of the day's events, yet his heart pounded in quiet trepidation. In the quiet hum of the classroom, students gathered around neatly decorated tables where Father's Day gifts were laid out. Vibrantly wrapped bouquets, boxes of homemade sweets, and cards adorned with heartfelt messages. The chatter among the students was buoyant, punctuated by proud declarations of how their fathers had excelled in football, academia, or business. Malik, seated at the back of the classroom with his textbook open, yet his thoughts far away, clutched tightly a small, worn photo of a man whose kind eyes had always been a mystery to him. Every whispered comment, some caring, others dismissive, reminded him of the day his simple conversation about his father had turned into an unintentional spectacle of ridicule. His earlier mention that "my dad works in the Pentagon" had been met with mockery, and even Mrs. Anderson's cutting jest still echoed in his ears. Yet beneath the hurt lay a steadfast inner resolve, a determination that one day the truth would shine through. The classroom itself was decorated with remnants of the Academy's tradition. Patriotic bunting, carefully arranged vases of fresh peonies, and banners proclaiming Happy Father's Day in bold, elegant script. As the bell rang and students filtered in with their elegantly wrapped gifts and congratulatory smiles, Malik remained quieter than usual. His dark eyes, earnest and reflective, wandered over the scene. While many of his peers enjoyed the bombast of the occasion, Malik's mind lingered on a deeper, quieter hope that his father's true work, the sacrifices made behind closed doors at the Pentagon, was a legacy of honor, not a fairy tale to be scoffed at. Throughout the morning, as teachers mingled with the students and colleagues exchanged pleasantries, Malik's thoughts oscillated between bitter memories of earlier insults and the potential of vindication. He remembered the sneering smirk on Mrs. Anderson's face when she'd suggested that his father might merely be a custodian rather than an esteemed strategist. That cruel laugh had stung, yet in its wake, a silent vow had taken root in his heart. He promised himself that one day he would prove that the strength of one's claim was not determined by superficial prejudice, but by undeniable truth. In one corner of the classroom, a group of boys proudly unwrapped gifts from their fathers, boasting about trophies and accolades. Across the room, a few girls exchanged knowing glances and whispered congratulations to each other. The contrast was vivid. Here, family success was celebrated with unabashed joy, while Malik's own revelation about his father was treated as a fanciful boast. His classmates had built a narrative out of what they believed was impossible, their disbelief manifesting in snickers and dismissive whispers. Yet Malik's eyes, though sorrowful, held a quiet anticipation, a belief that the day might bring a change that would silence ridicule forever. A nervous energy coursed through Malik as he fidgeted with a loose cuff of his uniform sleeve. Every so often, he would glance at the door, half expecting it to burst open with another arrival heralded by raucous celebration. In the back of his mind, he knew that today was not solely about tokens of affection or the shiny veneer of parental pride. There was an unspoken promise, a secret hope he had nurtured over many days of isolation and mockery, to one day witness the true stature of his father. He longed not for empty applause or forced admiration, but for a moment of pure, unassailable truth that would turn contempt into respect. As the morning progressed, the quiet murmur of routine conversations filled the room. Teachers made rounds, congratulating children on their father's achievements and casually asking about the gifts they had received. Yet a subtle tension hovered, a fragile anticipation of something extraordinary, as if the day itself held a hidden secret waiting to bloom. Malik's attention was drawn to a small commotion near the entrance. Gently, he strained to understand what was unfolding as a few of his peers began to disappear towards the corridor, their voices hushed with excitement. Rumors had already begun to circulate that, on this Father's Day, a special guest might be among them, a guest unlike any other. In that charged moment, Malik's heartbeat quickened. The prospect of a guest visit stirred memories of how deeply hurt he had been when his simple truth was belittled. But now, perhaps, the day might redeem that truth. Flickering hope ignited in his chest, and his anxious eyes searched the room for any sign of an arrival that would shift the balance. The atmosphere, once dominated by glittering decor and light-hearted banter, grew suddenly more intense, as if the very walls of Jefferson Academy were holding their breath for what was to come. Every whispered speculation among the students, every furtive glance exchanged by the teachers, bonded Malik's internal resolve with the certainty that today would not be like any other day. It was, after all, Father's Day, a moment designed to honor paternal figures, whether celebrated or uncelebrated. In Malik's heart, he clung to the hope that the father he had quietly spoken of, a man whose work in the Pentagon rendered him a sentinel of national security, might finally reveal himself, not merely as a distant figure of awe, but as the embodiment of courage and duty. Deep within him, Malik felt that such a revelation had the power to not only right past wrongs but to transform the very culture of the academy that had so callously dismissed him. As the class settled and the clock continued its steady march, Malik's thoughts became a tapestry of past humiliation interwoven with future promise. The gentle rustle of turning pages in textbooks and the soft murmur of teachers' voices formed a backdrop to a personal drama that was about to unfold. A drama in which a young man's resilience and a father's secret honor would collide in unexpected and life-changing ways. In that moment, amid the celebratory chaos and quiet pretenses, Malik Carter maintained his silent vigil, a steadfast sentinel waiting for the day his story would finally be written in ink finer than ridicule, in a narrative where truth and dignity would prevail. It was near noon on Father's Day, an occasion traditionally marked by cheerful exchanges of flowers and heartfelt greetings, when the heavy glass door of the Jefferson Academy classroom swung open with a deliberate stillness. The atmosphere in the room, already charged with anticipation from the earlier murmurs and hushed speculations, transformed in an instant. Every pair of eyes fixed themselves on the doorway, where a tall, composed figure now stood silhouetted against the bright hall light. Dressed in a sharply tailored dark suit that spoke of meticulous planning, Jonathan Carter, Malik's father, and one of the nation's most trusted strategists at the Pentagon, stepped into the room. The subtle gleam of an official multi-level access ID badge attached prominently to his lapel caught the light with every measured step he took. His expression was calm, almost stoic, and his gaze carried an intensity that left no room for frivolity. No cheerful greeting, no casual smile. His presence was an undeniable statement of purpose. For a brief, suspended moment, the bustling noise of the classroom faded into a collective, awed silence. Even the decorum of the room, with its polished desks and pristine chalkboard, seemed to bow to the gravity of the moment. The air grew thick with a mix of shock, disbelief, and the anticipatory thrum of something monumental about to be revealed. Mrs. Anderson, who had earlier ridiculed Malik's claim with a feigned smirk and patronizing jest, was the first to register the shift. Her practiced composure began to crumble under the weight of this unexpected intrusion. The same teacher who had once mocked Malik by suggesting his father might be just a custodian, now found herself momentarily rendered speechless and visibly unsettled. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of remorse and disbelief, darted around the room as if seeking an explanation for this sudden reversal of roles. In that instant, it became clear to everyone present that Jonathan Carter was not merely any parent arriving to honor Father's Day traditions. He was a high-ranking official with an authority that eclipsed the very pomp of the academy. With measured steps, Jonathan approached the front of the class. The murmurs and uncertain whispers from both students and staff gave way to an expectant hush. Standing squarely before the whiteboard where motivational quotes normally adorned the walls, he cleared his throat. The quiet that followed was heavy enough to be palpable. Then, in a firm but even tone that brooked no argument, he addressed the assembly. "Good morning," he said slowly, his voice clear and resonant, echoing across the room in a manner that silenced even the few lingering whispers. "I am Jonathan Carter, and yes, I am Malik's father. I have come here on this Father's Day not merely to celebrate a personal bond, but because I am here on urgent business." A ripple of astonishment spread among the students. Some exchanged glances of incredulity while others, who had always silently admired the idea of a courageous father, listened intently as he continued. Before further remarks could be made, Mrs. Anderson attempted, as if clinging to her old habit, to interject with a light-hearted quip. "Well, Mr. Carter, you must be here to share a few," she began, her tone unsteady, but he cut her off with a piercing, cold glance that froze her words on her lips. "Please," Jonathan said quietly but with unmistakable finality. "This is neither the time nor the place for levity. I came because an imminent threat has penetrated these very walls." His piercing gaze shifted across the room, making it clear that he was addressing not only the visible faces, but the unspoken complicity of an institution that had once failed to respect dignity. I am not here simply as a father. I serve a duty, one that demands I ensure the safety and integrity of every individual in this academy. The shock was tangible. The quiet murmur of the room now transformed into a complete, facilitated silence. Students who had earlier giggled at Malik's mention of the Pentagon now looked on with a mingling of fear and respect, their eyes wide in surprised wonder. Teachers exchanged strained glances and a few administrative staff members tensed, as if they were witnessing the crumbling facade of a system that prided itself on order and superiority. Jonathan's next words sent a chill down every spine. He stepped toward a table at the front of the class where a tablet lay waiting. With a deliberate swipe, he brought up a series of encrypted documents and live data streams on the large screen. On it appeared unmistakable evidence, a daunting array of real-time statistics and alerts that revealed a dangerous cyber intrusion. The visuals were unmistakable. Confidential data, critical network access points, and alarmingly, abnormal activity emanating from devices belonging to students and faculty alike. Somewhere within your network, he announced slowly, there is a threat. Someone has been attempting to breach security protocols that extend to governmental networks at the highest level. I have been monitoring these activities, and I can confirm that our systems have been manipulated. Every eye in that room was transfixed on the digital display. The implications were staggering. It was no longer a matter of personal pride or academic snobbery. It was a matter of national security. Jonathan's words resonated with an urgency that transformed the once frivolous chatter about social status into serious, fearful attention. Even those who had previously dismissed Malik were forced to reckon with the reality that their beloved institution might be under siege. In that silent, charged moment, the true weight of Jonathan Carter's dual identity became clear. He was not just the quiet young man's father whom the school had once trivialized with mockery. He was a guardian entrusted with the nation's secrets, a strategist who now bore the responsibility of defending this place where futures were being forged. His entrance, resplendent with authority and purpose, not only validated Malik's silent truth, but also laid bare an unexpected menace that lurked in the shadows of the academy's polished halls. The shock in the room was palpable as he continued. I have been assigned to neutralize an imminent cyber threat that has infiltrated your school's network. A threat that, if left unchecked, could compromise not only your safety but the security of sensitive governmental operations. Today, I ask you all to cooperate fully as measures are taken to safeguard this institution. Your well-being and the integrity of our national security depend on it. A collective shiver passed through the gathered crowd. The statement was absolute, leaving no room for further derision or dismissive laughter. For the first time, many in the room, including those who had once laughed at a young boy's humble declaration, realized that respect was not a currency earned by imposing elitist standards, but rather by the quiet, unyielding resolve to protect what is sacred. And so it was, on that fateful Father's Day, that Jonathan Carter's arrival redefined the day's tone. What had begun as an occasion rife with patronizing laughter and thinly veiled mockery was now eclipsed by a stark revelation. The invocation of a true guardian, whose duty required him to act decisively against a threat, a duty that resonated far beyond the confines of personal pride. As eyes filled with wonder and apprehension, and hearts began to beat with a mix of fear and newfound respect, the seeds of change took root in that prestigious academy. The day was no longer just about celebrating fatherhood. It had become a turning point, a moment when truth and accountability would silence mockery once and for all. Jonathan Carter's revelation of the urgent threat reverberated through the hushed classroom like the resonance of a starting gun. With deliberate swipes on his secure tablet, he brought up a series of live dashboards and alarming graphics that immediately seized everyone's attention. The display was a vivid tapestry of red alerts, numerical anomalies, and cryptic data streams that chronicled the escalating breach in real time. What had begun as a quiet day transformed into a crisis unfolding before the eyes of every student, teacher, and administrator at Jefferson Academy. Please, direct your attention to this, Jonathan said in an even, commanding tone that left no room for interruption. The screen now projected a sophisticated cyber monitoring interface developed by the Pentagon's cybersecurity division. Complex graphs marked with spikes in unauthorized access attempts, IP addresses flagged for suspicious activity, and encrypted code streams scrolled continuously, each element a stark reminder that someone, somewhere, was attempting to exploit the Academy's digital defenses. Jonathan's voice carried across the room as he meticulously explained, "For the past several days, our systems have been under a coordinated cyber assault. We have detected anomalies in the traffic that originates from the school's network. Upon closer analysis, it appears that there has been an unauthorized infiltration into our digital environment. I have traced the breach to activity that attempts to tap into secure, government-level channels, using devices that belong to both students and staff." Every word he uttered was measured and precise, informed by decades of experience in national security and strategic operations. His tone shattered any lingering pretense among the onlookers. The threat was not hypothetical but immediate and dangerous. As he navigated the display, Jonathan pointed at a section of the dashboard where a series of red bars pulsed rhythmically. "Here," he said, tapping on the screen to reveal detailed logs. "You see the abnormal data transmissions. They indicate that sensitive information that should be safeguarded by secure protocols, is being siphoned off. The source? Unauthorized connections usurping the ordinary network pathways provided for educational use. These transmissions carry the hallmarks of a sophisticated intrusion: encrypted payloads, covert command and control communications, and the use of student devices as unwitting proxies." His expert analysis was delivered in a calm, authoritative cadence that instantly transformed the skeptical murmurs into tense silence. With each passing minute, the gravity of the situation sank in among the students and faculty. Eyes widened as even the most indifferent among them struggled to reconcile the immaculate sheen of the Academy with the potential vulnerability that lay beneath. Jonathan's technical jargon resonated with a clarity that dispelled the earlier dismissals. His every gesture, from the deliberate swiping of his tablet to the unwavering focus in his gaze, confirmed that this was no ordinary glitch. It was an orchestrated, deliberate attempt to compromise the integrity of a system that, until now, had been taken for granted. "What does this mean?" a teacher finally managed to ask, her voice trembling in a mix of fear and astonishment. Jonathan's response was succinct, cutting through the question like a scalpel. "It means that someone is trying to exploit our very digital infrastructure to access restricted government-level systems. The intrusion has the potential not only to leak sensitive data, but to undermine the trust you all place in this institution." His words hung in the air, each syllable pulling the room deeper into a state of solemn recognition. Jonathan paused, allowing the stark reality of his revelations to set in. The dashboard continued to pulse ominously in front of them, a digital heartbeat of a system under siege. He then elaborated, "The activities I'm monitoring are not random. They follow a pattern, a deliberate, methodical approach that suggests the presence of a highly skilled operant. Given the current indicators, I can confirm that a malicious actor within our extended network has gained access, likely through compromised credentials and poorly secured devices. I have initiated countermeasures and have temporarily sealed off vulnerable gateways in cooperation with federal cybersecurity agencies. However, this is merely the tip of the iceberg." A low murmur began to rise among the audience as Jonathan's words sank in. The sophisticated nature of the alert broke through the previous veil of complacency that many had held about their school's security. Even students, long accustomed to academic pressures and occasional petty pranks, now found themselves grappling with the shock that their personal devices might have been unwitting accomplices to a high-stakes criminal act. The room's energy shifted. The atmosphere grew electrically charged with a blend of fear, disbelief, and the dawning realization that the safety of an entire community was at risk. Jonathan's eyes swept the room, pausing momentarily on Malik Carter. In that brief, unspoken moment, it was as if the young student's earlier quiet resilience was acknowledged by the formidable figure before him. "I bring this information to you today not to incite panic, but to demand cooperation and vigilance," Jonathan continued. His plan was now unfolding before them as he toggled between views on his tablet. revealing not just a threat but actionable data that would serve as the cornerstone for a full-scale counterattack. Our immediate objective is to identify and isolate the source of these malicious activities. I have already begun interfacing with external security protocols. I need everyone here to abide strictly by all directives that will be issued. Any connection or device that exhibits abnormal behavior must be reported instantly. This is a collective responsibility. A palpable silence swept over the room. The once dismissive laughter and smirks that had surrounded Malik's earlier claim dissipated completely, replaced by a sober awareness of the true magnitude of what was at stake. Jonathan's tactical expertise and unyielding authority had transformed a day meant for familial celebration into a battleground for digital integrity and national security. He then tapped on a specific alert on the screen, a detailed breakdown with timestamps, IP addresses, and geolocated coordinates, and stated firmly, "These details indicate that the breach is not merely a random act of cyber vandalism. Rather, it appears to be a premeditated attempt to infiltrate critical government networks by exploiting a frontline vulnerability within this very academy's digital ecosystem. I am tracking the digital footprints, and initial analysis suggests that the perpetrator is likely someone with authorized access, someone within the school's own IT framework." His words, though technical, struck a deep chord with everyone in the room, reminding them that corruption could seep into even the most trusted systems. As the presentation continued, Jonathan meticulously demonstrated how the attacker's method of using student devices as indirect conduits made detection more challenging. He explained how ephemeral the digital signals were and how they intermingled with routine school traffic, a statistical anomaly discernible only to those trained in the art of digital warfare. His expertise was evident in every detail, and his calm determination fueled the growing sense of urgency across the class. Every individual, teachers, students, even the administrative staff, was now transfixed, their earlier roles as dismissive bystanders transformed into active participants in an unfolding crisis. The academy, a symbol of pristine tradition and academic distinction, was suddenly portrayed in a stark new light, vulnerable, in need of protection, and in the crosshairs of a sophisticated cyber threat. In that charged environment, Jonathan Carter had seized control of a situation that was initially dismissed as a minor digression of prestige into something far graver: the security of the institution and, by extension, potentially national interests. With one final, piercing look across the silent, attentive faces, Jonathan concluded his impromptu briefing. "I have already engaged with federal cybersecurity teams, and together we will neutralize this threat. I ask each of you to remain calm and follow all guidelines until this situation is fully resolved." The room remained suspended in silence, a silence weighed down by the enormity of the revelation and the steely resolve of the man who had just transformed a day of light-hearted celebration into a stark call for collective accountability. Every eye in the room, including those that had once ridiculed Malik's quiet admission of pride, now reflected a dawning respect for the seriousness of the moment. In that charged silence, it was clear that the legacy of truth and authority had, at long last, begun to dismantle long-held prejudices, leaving behind nothing but the unassailable weight of responsibility and the promise of unwavering protection. No sooner had Jonathan Carter concluded his formal briefing than the atmosphere in the lecture hall shifted dramatically. With practiced precision, he raised a hand and signaled the commencement of a critical operation. His calm, authoritative tone bellowed the final orders as the room collectively held its breath. "Security teams, now," he commanded. In that split second, the once stilled murmurs turned to a flurry of purposeful movement. Within moments, two uniformed federal agents, dressed in dark suits and carrying discreet earpieces, stepped forward from the door. Their faces were set in determined lines as they strode toward an inconspicuous figure who had been unseen by most but now could no longer hide among the shadows of the corridor. That figure, later identified as the school's IT consultant, had been operating under the guise of routine maintenance on the academy's network. Now, overwhelmed by the gravity of Jonathan's revelations, the consultant's expression shifted from feigned indifference to palpable anxiety. "Sir, you're under arrest," the lead agent stated assertively as he approached the suspect. In an orchestrated flurry of precise motions, The agent swiftly secured the consultant's hands with a pair of cold steel handcuffs. The sound of the clamping metal resonated in the room, a stark punctuation to the unfolding drama. Gasps and whispers erupted from every corner of the hall. Even the teachers, who had prided themselves on maintaining decorum within the pristine walls of Jefferson Academy, were visibly shaken. Eyes widened, and some exchanged uneasy glances as they realized that the breach was not a distant possibility. It was happening here, among them. Jonathan maintained his steady gaze as he surveyed the scene. His voice, now more urgent yet still measured, reverberated across the charged silence. "This is not an isolated incident of technical negligence," he declared. "It is a calculated, covert operation designed to exploit vulnerabilities not only in your network but in the very systems that safeguard our national security. The betrayal comes from within our own trusted circle." His words cut through the stunned silence like a scalpel, laying bare the chilling truth that an insider had sought to profit from, if not destroy, the trust placed in this venerable institution. In the midst of chaos, Mrs. Anderson, who had earlier dismissed Malik's proud assertion with dismissive sarcasm, now stood speechless. The condescending glint in her eyes had been replaced by a dawning horror. Her face flushed with remorse as she stepped back, unable to meet the unwavering gaze of Jonathan or the pained eyes of Malik, who watched from the back of the room. The once rocky ground of prejudice and ridicule was now crumbling before the overwhelming force of truth. A teacher near the front of the class, trembling, managed to ask in a hushed tone, "How could someone from within our team do this?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the awareness that the immaculate reputation of Jefferson Academy had been sullied not by foreign adversaries but by one of its own insiders. Jonathan's response was both succinct and chilling. "When trust is betrayed, the ripple effects harm everyone. We cannot allow such compromise to stand. The security lapses you're witnessing are deliberate and must be corrected immediately." As the agents escorted the IT consultant out of the room, an eerie quiet fell over the assembly. Students, who moments earlier had dismissed Malik's statement with mocking disbelief, now stared in shock and introspection. The mesmerizing digital display on Jonathan's tablet still showed real-time alerts and technical logs of the cyber intrusion, the evidence of the sophisticated operation that had infiltrated the Academy's network. Each red warning bar and rapid scrolling code reiterated that the breach was not a harmless prank, but an assault on both the school's integrity and the national security vested in its digital systems. Malik's heart pounded in his chest as he absorbed the gravity of the reality unfolding before him. All the laughter and sneers that had once marked his every mention of the Pentagon were replaced by a sober silence and a collective recognition. His father's work was not an idle boast, but a shield safeguarding the country's most vital secrets. His previously unchallenged truth had transformed into the catalyst for a rigorous and unforgiving investigation, one that left no stone unturned and no prejudice unscathed. In the ensuing minutes, administrative staff, previously complicit in small acts of snide humor, now gathered around Jonathan in clusters, their expressions a blend of fear, guilt, and reluctant acknowledgement. The corridors, polished moments before with the sheen of academic grandeur, echoed with murmurs about accountability and the vulnerability of even the most esteemed institutions. Jonathan continued to guide the unfolding events with the steely confidence of a seasoned strategist. "Let this serve as a reminder," he stated quietly yet firmly, "that the integrity of our systems must be preserved at all costs. Prejudice and ignorance have no place when the safety of our community and country is at risk." The arrest of the IT consultant marked a turning point, a moment when the true weight of trust, responsibility, and dignity converged within the hallways of Jefferson Academy. For Malik, who had long suffered the sting of ridicule simply for stating an undeniable fact about his father's honorable service, this dramatic unfolding was both vindication and a lesson. He realized, with a bittersweet clarity, that respect must be earned not through empty words, but through unyielding courage in the face of adversity. As the security personnel escorted the now-detained consultant away into the bright corridor beyond, the room was filled with heavy, reflective silence. There was no clamor for applause or hollow congratulatory words. Instead, A quiet resolve began to replace the echoes of past mockery. Staff and students alike were left to confront their own biases, forced to acknowledge that truth, though it may be cloaked in quiet dignity, can sometimes emerge from the most unexpected sources. Jonathan Carter's decisive intervention, and the swift action that followed, had unmasked a betrayal that threatened not only a prestigious institution, but the very trust that underpinned national security. In that charged moment, the truth had punctured the indifferent veil of prejudice and indifference, and the seeds of newfound respect, built on honesty and sacrifice, began to take root among those who had once scoffed at a young boy's quiet declaration. In the days that followed the dramatic takedown of the infiltrator, Jefferson Academy found itself smothered in an uneasy quiet. The aftermath of the unfolding crisis, exposed in stark relief by Jonathan Carter's unyielding intervention, left teachers, administrators, and students alike confronting the consequences of their previous indifference. The corridors, once echoing with light banter and careless laughter, now hummed with somber conversation and reflective silence. For many, the revelation that a meticulously orchestrated cyber attack had been thwarted within their own walls was a jarring wake-up call. For Malik Carter, it bore a more personal significance. His once dismissed truth now shone in the harsh light of reality. In the wake of the incident, school officials convened a series of urgent meetings. Faculty members were questioned about maintenance of security protocols and the ways in which institutional biases had allowed not only a cyber threat to fester but had also jeopardized the very dignity of its students. The scandal had forced those who once sneered at Malik's quiet announcement to peer into the mirror of their own complicity. Rumors of sweeping administrative changes and a complete overhaul of digital safeguarding policies rippled through the academy. But amid the institutional recalibration, one moment stood out with nearly transformative clarity. Late one afternoon, when the halls had emptied of their daily bustle and even the fluorescent lights seemed subdued beneath the weight of introspection, Malik found himself alone in one of the quieter corridors. The echoes of footsteps and the distant murmur of hushed conversations filled the space as he slowly made his way towards his locker, a small, private sanctuary where he could collect his thoughts. His mind drifted back to that day in class when his father's honorable profession had been reduced to ridicule. Every sneer, every sarcastic remark had cut deep. And yet, just as he had endured the humiliation with a quiet resolve, now he witnessed its aftermath. A congregation of adults and peers forced to reckon with the error of their ways. Almost imperceptibly at first, footsteps approached behind him. Malik turned slowly, and there stood Mrs. Anderson. Her eyes, downcast and filled with remorse, could no longer meet his steady, dark gaze. For a long, heavy moment, silence reigned between them, a silence that spoke volumes of regret and the desire for recompense. With trembling sincerity, she finally broke that silence. "Malik, she began, but her voice caught in the weight of her own apologies. Unable to bear the unsaid all at once, Mrs. Anderson looked away, swallowing visibly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words lacking the forthright conviction her previous mockery had boasted. She felt her own disgrace as she shivered beneath the piercing clarity of truth, a truth that had been exemplified by Jonathan Carter and was now etched indelibly in every heart present at Jefferson. Malik's expression, composed and calm as always, did not flare with anger or retaliation. Instead, he took a slow, steady breath and, in a voice both soft and measured, replied, "I didn't ask you to believe." A long pause followed as even Mrs. Anderson struggled to understand the full import of his words. Then, with a quiet fortitude that belied the pain of years past, he added, "I only asked that you not humiliate." In that brief exchange, the room seemed to crystallize into a moment of collective clarity. His voice, a quiet instrument of truth, resonated with the solemn promise of a future unburdened by shallow judgments. It was not a demand for blind acceptance, but a simple plea for respect, a call for dignity that transcends the biases of age and appearance. The corridor absorbed his words, echoing them back as both a requiem for past wrongs and an anthem for the change that now began to take shape within every heart present. Over the following weeks, the Academy's culture started to shift imperceptibly at first. Discussions on institutional reform, diversity, and respect began to surface in faculty meetings and among student groups. Even those who had once taken part in the casual mockery were forced to re-examine the true essence of their professionalism and personal conduct. Jonathan Carter's intervention had not only safeguarded the network, but had also peeled away layers of societal prejudice that had long festered beneath the facade of elitism. Malik, for his part, returned to his studies with an even firmer resolve. While his days were still marked by the challenges of prevailing societal attitudes, he also discovered a newfound strength in the acknowledgement of his inherent worth. His quiet perseverance, once dismissed as mere silence in the face of ridicule, had now become a powerful statement on its own, a testament to the fact that dignity, when championed by truth, demands respect without needing loud proclamations. As the school year continued, Jefferson Academy took its tentative steps toward healing. The IT breach was investigated thoroughly, and preventive measures were introduced not just in technology, but in policy, ensuring that every member of the academy would be seen for who they really were, free from shallow labels. New programs promoting digital ethics and inclusion were launched, inviting both faculty and students to participate in building a community where every voice mattered. In quiet moments, long after the tumult of that crisis had faded into memory, the legacy of that day persisted. Malik's gentle words, once carried on whispered irony, now echoed as a clarion call for humility and understanding across the academy's halls. His father's reputation, once used as a dismissive punchline, was now a living reminder that truth has the power to disarm prejudice and restore honor. They laughed at his words, but fell silent in the presence of his father. Subscribe to see more stories where truth emerges without warning and dignity speaks quietly, but undeniably.